Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. In this tutorial video, we will show how to sew seat cushions. These cushions include a segmented top with a partially rolled front. What is a segmented cushion? It has two separate pieces of foam inside the cushion cover, one in front and the other in the back, and they are separated by a fabric pole to give the cushion a beautiful tailored look, similar to a knee-rise cushion. Before we get started, let's have a discussion of how the cushion is made.
Hi, I'm Eric Grant with Sailrite. We are redoing an entire salon in a seaward sailboat, and we're going to redo the cushions, which are like this. This is the old cushion, and this cushion has a fabric pole, also a curve, and a little pip up here at the top. The way that they've fashioned this is that they have a zipper in the bottom side to separate this piece of foam from this piece of foam. And then on the back side, you can see a zipper back there as well. So we're going to show you how to remake this cushion with your favorite fabric from Sailrite. We'll be using Outdura. Let's start by inspecting how they made this old one. So you can see that there is a separate piece of fabric sewn here with a fabric pole that's on the inside, which we'll show later on. You can see that this piece is a boxing piece that goes all the way back here, and then a zipper plaque boxing starts. And if you continue all the way around, there's where the zipper plaque boxing stops. It goes around here, and then it comes over here and curves down to here. So this section here wraps around the front without a boxing piece and attaches to the bottom plate. And then here's a separate boxing piece which pulls down this corner and creates a curve here that is sewn in and attaches to the bottom plate. Okay, so now that we know that, let's take it apart and remove the foam. So on the bottom side here, we'll remove this front foam just by opening this up and pulling the foam out. Now we're going to be reusing the foam, but if you had to make new foam, you just simply cut it to the shape that you need, just like this, and you'd pattern off of it. So let's set that aside. Now we know the top side because it has this batting wrapped around it. If you didn't have the batting and you didn't know which is the top, you might want to mark it top front.
Pausing the video here, we can see the fabric pole that is between the two separate pieces of foam.
Okay, for this piece, unzip this back portion, and we can open it up and remove it from the cover. Now we're going to keep the cover as a reference in how to make this, but we're going to be using the foam to pattern the new fabric.
Our first task, pattern the bottom plate for a segmented cushion with a rolled front.
For the bottom plate, we're going to be using this Eversoft vinyl. You can use any vinyl, but Eversoft is a great vinyl fabric that's good for indoor and outdoor applications. It has a smooth look, which this one is, and a pebbled look as well. So we've laid it so that the outside surface is down. Then we're going to take our foam and lay it in a spot where it doesn't utilize too much of the vinyl fabric, but not right up against the edge unless you had a straight edge. And this is our piece that goes up in the front. I'm just going to put it in here and fit it in there just like it was. Make sure everything's together nicely. Now we want to pattern around the foam, whether it be new foam or old foam. And I know this side is basically straight, so I take my clear acrylic ruler and I have it slightly canted towards the bottom, and I just take my scribe ball or a pencil and mark that edge like that. So it's almost exactly the same size as the foam, if not just a teeny bit larger, and that's what we want. Now for these curved edges, I can't usually use a scribe ball, so I just hold my pencil at a slight 30 degrees and I mark around this curve, trying to follow the contour as best as possible, like that. Okay, and then we'll continue to go around any curves, and so that looks pretty good like that. Here's a straight edge. We're just going to use the clear acrylic ruler to get that. We'll scribe that, and then we'll join this line. So see how this one's slightly off? All I do is I just go over and I go like that. Now this is that little pip that we showed earlier, so I'm going to go around it and curve it slightly, because I do believe it's curved, and then we follow this edge all the way around. Okay, so now we're going to remove this front piece, just put it on top up here, and we're going to follow this edge. And if it's not a smooth curve, then I'm going to smooth it out. So it goes all the way to here. That's where our fabric pole is going to be. So let's remove this now. Now anything like this over here, see where this dips in? Obviously we don't want to follow that. We want to smooth that out. We don't want to cut it like that. So anything that's a little bit of a weird shape, we want to smooth it out. But I think this looks pretty good. So this is the zipper we're going to be using. So I'm going to put this zipper on top of this fabric pole line, but so that it's centered with that line, and I'm going to put a mark here. So now what I want to do is I want to mark basically that same distance, and it's hard to do this because it's not a straight line, it's got a slight curve in it. This is where the edge of the zipper is going to go down, so I'm being careful just to follow that shape at the same distance all the way across here to there. We'll cut a length of zipper longer than that curve that we're going to do, and we're going to put double-sided tape on both sides of the flange. This is a 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas and upholstery, very close to the raw edge of the zipper. Don't buy this double-sided tape elsewhere. This is a acrylic glue, not a rubber-based glue, so it doesn't yellow, and it sticks perfectly. The Sailrite stuff is the best. Before we apply that zipper, let's go ahead and cut this out, and I'm just going to cut right on top of those lines that we struck. We're not going to cut this. We're going to leave that hole. So let's cut this out, and then we'll apply the zipper.
The front piece of foam is inserted in the bottom side through a zipper. We're going to install the zipper in the bottom plate.
We peeled off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and we have that line that we struck, and that puts the teeth right on top of the line that we had before. And I go over the edge just slightly. Since this has a curve, it's going to have a few wrinkles in it because we want to follow that line. And don't worry about the wrinkles. You just want to try to get the zipper down flat. You might want to cut some slits in this. It looks like I need to. So this side has to stretch, this side has to shrink up. So I'm just going to put some slits at the curve here, which will help it to go around that curve. Let me show you. So we're still matching it up to that edge. And you can see that slit opens up to allow it to go there. So I'm basically putting that side on first. And I think this is going to go down okay here. Then what I do is I just basically press down with my fingers and allow wrinkles to take place on the other side. Now this one's a little bit too much, so I'm going to spread this one out a little bit because I don't want it to be too wrinkly. And that's all you need to do. I like to sew with about a 4mm to 3mm stitch length, so I set it there, and I'll set the reverse about the same. Okay, so we're just going to sew alongside the zipper. I'm going to move the needle to the left to get closer to the teeth, and I'll do a little bit of reversing here. It's a little bit too short of a stitch length. I'm going to go to a little bit higher, 4mm. We just sew alongside the teeth and go ahead and sew those wrinkles in place. And then we're going to sew on the other side in the same manner. So we have it sewn on both sides. We're going to flip it over. And we can see the stitching here. We're going to take our scissors and we're going to cut right in the middle, between the stitches, and being sure not to cut the zipper as we do this. To put the slider on, I'm going to open up the teeth, and then I'm going to run the slider on as shown. This is a Linzip number 5 zipper. And we want to start it evenly. And we want to put the slider someplace in the middle like that, okay? Then we're going to cut the excess zipper off so that it's flush on the ends.
Okay, the next job is to pattern the top plates. There'll be 2 of them since it's segmented.
I've been doing so many of these cushions, but this one has a curve, and that's why I put the slider on, because usually they're straight.
This, I actually didn't have to put the slider on yet. I could have actually removed this piece, and because we can use this piece for one of the top plates. This piece is going to be like the top plate, but this is going to have excess fabric over here. So let's start with this one. So we remove this bottom half so we can use it as a template. This is Outdura. This is a 100% Sushin dyed acrylic fabric that's exceptional for outdoor applications and indoor. It's very UV resistant, stain resistant, water resistant. This is the outside surface. There are tons of colors to choose from on the Sailrite website. This side of this Outdura has a urethane coating. Not all of them have that, which stabilizes the large weave of this fabric. So the right side is down, which means the wrong sides have to face each other. So this is the wrong side, obviously, of this. So this goes down like this because this is going to be the top plate, this is the bottom plate. And this just needs to fit in here within the urethane coating, just like that, and be nice and flat. Then we take our chalk pencil and we go around the edge. Now, by using the bottom plate, we're assured that the boxing, which will be cut, will match this perfectly. Instead of using our foam, we're going to use the bottom plate as a template. So now here at the zipper, we're just going to go right along those teeth because that should be the center of this cut. So just like that, we're going to go all the way around. This is where the zipper was, and we need to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and so you can just do this freehand if you'd like, but I like to actually measure it and then add the 1/2 inch by going from dot to dot. So we need to do this all along this edge to here. So I'm using the Sailrite Edge hot knife, and this is the precision cutting blade and foot, and this doesn't require a cutting glass. So I love to use it for almost all my upholstery projects now, and all you have to do is just cut right on those lines that we drew on the fabric to cut it to the size, and this seals the edge of the Outdura fabric. Now we don't want to cut on this line, we want to cut on the new 1/2 inch seam allowance line for this. As is customary, the wrong side is up on our Outdura fabric, which means the wrong side should be down on our plate fabric, since we're doing this as the bottom plate and we're making the top plate. Now we need to add excess fabric here, so let's go to the foam and determine how much. Okay, so this is our front piece, and this is the part that has the boxing that goes all the way down here. This is a separate piece of boxing, so you could tell that it was separate basically here. This has to be pulled down, so I'm just going to put a mark here with a marker, and I know that this is the edge here, so basically right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a soft tape measure, because we need to determine how much more fabric we need to add. We're going to go straight to the cut right here between the fabric pole, and we're going to add a 1/2 inch for seam allowance. So a 1/2 inch has been added there, and we're going to measure, I'm just going to pull this out so you can do this, measure down here to the bottom edge, and I get 10.5 inches. 11 inches would be that if you add a 1/2 inch, so that's 11 inches. So I'm going to take this panel and I'm going to turn it so that its wrong side is up, and I'm going to put this right on it to determine where that is. So see how I marked it with a marker here? I got the wrong color scribble. We're going to put a mark right there, and we're going to put a mark right here. That's where that's going to come down with extra fabric. So I'm going to transfer that mark with my white scribe ball to this side, directly over top of it, just on the edge, and this side right here. So imagine this being the boxing that comes down. We're going to do a straight line there, and we're also going to do a straight line there, which means I'm going to take my clear acrylic ruler and I'm going to put it on so that it's perpendicular to this edge, and I'm going to strike a line with my chalk. I don't know how deep we'll go, and I'm going to do the same thing over here so that it's parallel with that line that we just struck right here. Okay, so now we're going to trace around this. And we also have to have enough fabric to add for the 1/2 inch seam allowance, which I'm a little bit outside the urethane, so I'm going to move this over a little bit more like that. So let's trace this now. And we'll stop there. We'll come around here, and we're going to trace the zipper here, and then we're going to add a 1/2 inch to this, just like we showed before. So we're going to add a 1/2 inch to this zippered edge, all the way to here. So now we add the 11 inches, and the 11 inches goes from our new seam line, so we counted for that. So 11 inches to there, and all I do is strike a line there. Obviously this should be the same, 11 inches there, so this should be perpendicular to the edge, which it is. Boom, like that. So we're going to use our hot knife, and we are going to cut this out, and we're going to confirm it on the foam before we move on. So now we're going to use this, and this is the right side. This is the wrong side is facing down. We're going to position it over the top of this, and it should be oversized like it is here. That's normal for seam allowance, and also when it's sewing, it'll compress it. And you can see that this is basically just like what they had before. There's a boxing piece here. This one comes over with a rounded edge here, so that'll hug it beautifully. So I think we've done it exactly right.
In this chapter, we're going to be showing how to measure for the boxing pieces.
If I measure the thickness of my foam, I get 4 inches. We're going to cut our boxing width to a 1/2 inch larger than the thickness of the foam, so for us, 4.5 inches. This is the back side of the cushion where there's going to be a zipper plaque. So this will be boxing all the way to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tape measure, and I'm going to measure about 3 inches past this corner. There's no hard fast rule, and I make sure I count for the pip, and I come all the way around. This one does have a pip, yours probably won't. And what I get is 24 inches all the way to that mark. Now I need to add 4 inches to that. So we're going to cut this one to 28 inches in length. This one right here is the fabric that wraps to the bottom side, so I don't have to measure that. But this one I do have to measure. So I'm going to put it on that black mark at a 1/2 inch past the black mark for seam allowance, and then to here, and I'm going to add a 1/2 inch to that, so that's 4.5 inches in length for this little piece here. Then from here, I'm going to measure just to the thing. I'm not adding seam allowance because I add extra, and I'm going to wrap it around here, and I'm going to come to the back side about 3 inches or 4, which is 22. And then what I'm going to do at 22, which is 3 or 4 inches, I'm going to add 4 inches to that. So that's 26 inches for this boxing piece. The zipper, remember I like to start 2 or 3 inches from here, so I'm just going to put my tape measure approximately there and go around here for the zipper plaque boxing, and I get around 42 inches. I'm going to add an inch to that, so 43 inches for the zipper plaque boxing. And the zipper plaque boxing is going to be the 4.5 inches plus the width of the zipper in the width.
And now we'll cut our boxing pieces to size.
So 4.5 inches for our regular boxing, and our zipper plaque boxing. I'm going to start with the zipper plaque boxing just so you can see. So there's 4.5 right there on my clear acrylic ruler. And what I want to do is I want to add the width of the zipper to the zipper plaque boxing. So I usually just like to put my zipper on here and put a mark over here, and that way I know the actual measurement. So we started with 4.5 and add the width of the zipper. So now I need to cut my my zipper plaque boxing to this new width. And what was it? It was 43 inches, so I'll make sure that I have 43 inches in length of that. As you can see, I did my zipper plaque boxing and I did my other boxing pieces at the same time. Now we just cut them all out with the hot knife to seal the edges. So I've taken my boxing pieces and I pinned them with some multi-use pins around the perimeter because we need to round the corners. This is obviously rounded, so I'm going to just put a little arrow there to indicate that we need to round that one. And this one is obviously rounded, so another arrow here indicating that that's rounded. Around here it's not. This piece is not rounded in any way. So to round the corners of these two pieces, I'm just going to take some tape here and kind of be a little bit off from the edges. And I'm going to take my chalk and I'm going to go like this, which is actually a great way to round a corner. And we'll do the second, we'll do the exact same thing here. I'm going to take my hot knife and cut that off.
Let's go ahead and create our zipper plaque boxing. This is the boxing with the zipper.
Now I'm going to take the zipper plaque boxing off and we're going to put a zipper in it. And one way to do an easy zipper is to actually fold it so that the right side, this is the right side, this is the wrong side, is facing each other. So we fold it right in half and we'll take it to the machine and show you what we do next. Okay, so this is a portion of my zipper, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just have the needle come down like in the middle of the teeth, right there. I'm not going to go through it. And then I'm going to take my edge guide and I'm going to put it so that it's right there against the zipper, and I'm going to remove the zipper. Okay? So now with this folded in half so that outside surfaces are facing each other, and I'm going to sew with a long stitch length, usually about 6 millimeters, and I'm not going to do any reversing because this is actually going to come up in a little bit. We have to rip it up, and I'm going to sew right along here. I'm going to fold it as I go. This is the stitch that we did, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to carefully cut right on that fold that we made. We want to try to be in the center. It's not too hard to do. All the way down its length. So now we're going to put this in, and notice that I've splayed this open here, and this is the right side and wrong side's up, but yet this shows the outside when you do this. And you just put your Linzip zipper number 5 on top, and it should be almost the same size as the part that you just cut open. And we're just going to sew right along those teeth. And I am going to do a little bit of reversing. I'm going to put the needle in the right position to get closer to those teeth. Let me get it started here. We did not baste anything. I'm just going to do it slowly on this one side first. So right here, a little bit of reversing, and then sew down the side, making sure that it's centered as you go. So just sew a little bit at a time, positioning the zipper. Hold your fingers down here so that nothing moves as you get close to sewing. And we'll sew all the way to the other end and do some reversing, and then I'll show you what we do on the next stitch. Okay, now we're ready for the next side, and I just reverse it around and we sew on the same side so the zipper's still in the right position. I did mention that we switched back to a 4 millimeter stitch length. I recommend that, though it's not a big deal if you didn't. And now we can go pretty fast because everything is sewing down. So all I do now is I put the zipper in front of me and I put some pressure down with this hand, and I just go like that. That keeps the zipper nice and flat. We'll take a seam ripper and we will actually rip those stitches that we put in originally, and being careful not to hurt the zipper and the fabric. Pretty easy. And then you will have some loose threads in here. You can clean them up if you want, but I usually just let it go and they fall out on their own. Okay, and if you've done it right, this is your 4.5 inch boxing. This should equal about 4.5 inches when you're done, and even if it's a little bit off, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's pretty accurate.
In this chapter, we'll be joining the boxing ends together.
Okay, so now what I do is I put my foam together and I take my next boxing piece, which we'll just start with this one. This one goes like this and wraps around here. And so I know that this would be attached to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put outside surfaces facing each other like this, and we're going to sew a 1/2 inch across here. I'm going to take some of my vinyl, my Eversoft vinyl, and I'm going to cut little pieces like this just to reinforce the zipper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it over top of the teeth here when I sew this 1/2 inch. I want these ends to be lined up as best as possible. And we're going to put it in at the 1/2 inch. So I'm going to put the needle in the center position. 1/2 inch is on the needle plate right there. And we're going to do a little bit of reversing at the top here. Hold my trailer so I don't lose it because it's really short. Okay. Twice I went back, and then when I go over the teeth, I want to make sure that I don't actually run the zipper or the needle into the teeth. So I'm going to go over it slowly at the teeth, and then I'm going to go backwards over the teeth one more time just to secure it well. And we're going to sew all the way to the edge and reverse there. So right there. Okay, that's done. Let's take it back to the foam. Okay, before we sew on this side, we have to put in the slider, which we could have done before we sewed the other side on too, but just separate the teeth, put the slider on so the puller is facing the outside, and leave it a foot or two down the length of the zipper. So let's see, right there. And I ran into my stitches. Yeah, my stitches are in the way. I got to cut those. So right about there. Okay, so now let's put it back on the foam just to assure that we're going to put the next piece on right, since we have the corners done. This one goes here, this wraps around here, and let's grab that next piece, which is here. The rounded corner goes up, so it goes on like this, and this means this would be sewn on outside surfaces facing each other like this, in the same manner that we did on the other end with a little piece of vinyl. Okay, the final piece of boxing is this one. So outside surfaces would face each other, and this bottom edge would be flush. Okay, now when you sew around this perimeter, you're going to find that this is going to be shorter. It's probably going to stop right about there. Don't be alarmed by that. That helps to pull the fabric down into this valley here, which actually makes the cover look better. So let's go ahead and take this to the machine. Okay, so we're going to start here at the bottom edge. This is the curve here, which is the top edge, and we're going to sew a 1/2 inch right there, and I'm going to put the magnetic guide on so that we know where the 1/2 inch is. Needles in center position, and I'm doing the 4mm stitch length. So let's do some reversing here. Okay, and then we want to follow that edge and the corner, so watch. So when I get to that curve, I'm going to pull this back when it's directly across from the needle without sewing any wrinkles in. Pull back. And then we're going to do reversing here. Okay, as I talked about, remember I said that it would stop short of this top edge? That's quite all right.
In this chapter, we are discussing a different cushion that is shaped with an angled edge, which is incorporated in the top plate's boxing. Watch or skip this chapter depending on the shape of your cushion.
Now, if your foam has a boxing that comes over the side like this, and you have a wedge, or I should say an angled side like this, you're going to have extra fabric here at this location. So here is our plate that we've cut, and we've seamed it for the fabric pole that goes between the two layers of foam. And if I lay it on top, let's get it in the right spot so that it's equal on all sides, and this boxing comes down the front, you'll see that when it snugs up to the foam, you actually have to sew in a pleat. So with everything in the right spot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pleat this with my hand, and sometimes you can even take a clip and do this, which works pretty well. So I'll do this, bam, and that takes up the excess. So then I'm going to take my chalk, and I'm going to mark on this side, going all the way to there, and then I'll mark directly on this side, going all the way up there. And then we obviously would fold this in towards the inside, and we'd sew this in. So it would fold so that those lines are directly on top, and we'd sew it like that. So that's what you do with a situation that takes a turn like that to get this boxing to take up the shape. So here's what it looks like when we're done. It looks great on the outside. There's going to be no top stitch for this, and if you flip it to the underside, you can see that our stitch is right on top of that chalk line, which we transferred to the back side. And the way to do that is I put a pin here and put a mark up here, and then put little notches at the bottom, and drew a chalk line there. And so now when it fits over the foam, we get that, and that should work great. Don't worry about this little dog ear. That is often the case with pleats like this. It'll come out a little bit different. but we'll just cut this off. You can see there was some extra fabric here, and I just took a straight edge with some chalk, and we'll use the hot knife and we'll cut it there. That won't cause any problems at all.
Here's that finished cushion with the segmented sections and the rolled front with that pleat. It looks gorgeous, and you can't even tell it's there hardly. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's sew the top plate sections together.
This is the top plate. We're going to sew these together. This is the 1/2 inch seam allowance for the zipper pull, the pull tab. So we're going to put double-sided tape on this. I am going to baste this because I want this to be fairly accurate here. And I'm putting it close to the raw edge on one of these panels, doesn't matter which. Outside surfaces will face each other. Now we definitely want to press this down because this is an acrylic fabric, and an acrylic fabric doesn't allow much stain or water to stick to it, and that means the glue won't either. So I press it down with the Sailrite canvas patterning ruler, but you could use another heavy object for that. Okay. Now let's peel off the transfer paper. Anytime you have a curve like this and you add a 1/2 inch seam allowance here and a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, you're going to end up with some oddities. You're going to have one panel bigger than the other. We're going to start at this end because we know that this is a straight edge here, and we're going to baste it and clip it. And the reason we're going to clip it is it's going to take up some shape. So I'm going to use these clips that we're going to be carrying real soon. I love these things. So we're going to clip it here, and we're going to baste, and then we're starting to get some shape here, which means this one's going to have to shrink up just a little bit as we go. And we're going to clip it here because it's going to start to take shape. And you're going to notice that they're not going to match up. And don't be alarmed by that. If it were straight, it would match up, but this curve is going to throw things out of wacko. So we're going to clip it here because it's going to come under some stress. See, it's folding this end up. That's why we clip it, because the double-sided tape won't hold perfectly for that. Okay, so we're off. Okay, don't worry about that. We're going to sew it first, and then we're going to trim it using the bottom plate. So let's clip it here too. Let's take it to the machine. So I removed the clip on the end, and we want to sew a 1/2 inch from the raw edge, which is right here. And I'm going to lower my plate. I don't want to sew any wrinkles into the seam allowance area. So I'm going to make sure the seam allowance area is nice and flat. And we are going to do some reversing here. Is that at a 1/2 inch? Yeah, it is, yeah. So there. Okay. So I'm going to follow this curve. Wrinkles can be on the inside here, but not in the seam allowance area. And then as we get to each one of these clips, we'll just move them, making sure the edges are still matched up. We're going to sew all the way to the end and then do some reversing there. Got to push this in because you see the wrinkle happening. If you push it in and push the fabric that direction, that'll get rid of the wrinkles. So what I like to do now, just to make sure that we don't have this kind of issue happen, is I like to put a tacking stitch just so that this is splayed out, just on the ends, almost an 1/8 inch from the edge of the fabric. You don't want this stitch to show up. You just want it to make sure you don't have to worry about that in a later step. So we just do some reversing there, and then I do the same thing over here. Now with this one, let me cut my trailers. With this one, the fabric needs to be trimmed, but we know where it needs to be trimmed. It needs to be trimmed right there. So what I do is I splay it out. Seam allowance is going the one direction, but it doesn't really matter which direction it goes. Just like that. Okay, now let's go to the table. We're going to zip our bottom plate back together again so the ends are even. If they're not, then you need to re-zip. I think that's pretty good. Let's see. Now, so we have to zip it on all the way and then reinstall the slider to get that zipper slider to be in the middle with the ends closed. So that's just something you got to do. Make sure the pullers go in the right direction, which is to the outside surface. I lay my top plate down. Because of this curve, we have excess fabric down here, and I take my bottom plate, outside surfaces would face each other in this scenario, and we want this to match up. So now remember that this is my excess that rolls over, so that we don't want to cut off. But now everything matches here, and all I do is trim off this excess, and I need my chalk for that. So what we'll do here is we're just going to go up like that, and we're going to take that and mark it right to there, which should match up to that. Looks like I need to go a little bit in. And we'll chop this little section off because of this difference, and that'll make it flush.
Adding the fabric pull to the top plate is next.
So now I have my vinyl fabric, which is my bottom plate, and I'm going to cut up a fabric pole that is exactly the thickness of the foam. I don't know the exact length, so I'm just going to make it this whole length here. So if I measure here to here, it's 4 inches. We're going to cut it out with scissors. We're going to flip this plate, and we're going to sew the fabric pole onto the seam allowance area. Okay, and we want this to stop 1 1/4 inches from the edge, because we don't want it to fall into the spot where we're going to be sewing. So I just measure, and I strike a little line here indicating 1 1/4 from the edge, 1 1/4 here. It doesn't have to be exactly accurate, but that's what I'm doing. And we're going to put double-sided tape. Now this is a spot that it's going to have that extra foam in it, and it can go either on the back side or the front side. I'm going to put it on the back side, so that means double-sided tape is going to go right here, and we're going to cut it to length after we get it started to baste. So double-sided tape right here. Okay, we're going to start at our 1 1/4, and we are going to put this slightly over that chalk edge, because we're going to sew pretty much right in that area. Maybe not on that seam, but very close to it. So if you want to chalk a line, you can, but I'm just basically lifting it up and getting it close to that area, a little bit over that chalk line or seam line that we just sewed. Now I'm to the end, and I'm just going to randomly cut to that mark without cutting my decorative fabric underneath. And it's basted down pretty well. You can see the flanges over on this side. Let's take it to the machine. Easiest way to sew it is to actually lay it down like this, so you can see the seam allowance that you had for your decorative fabric. We'll start here at the end. And we're going to sew just a little bit outside of that stitch that we made to sew those panels together. It doesn't have to be right on it, because it's basically going to pull very, very close to it. But we don't want it over the top of it. So we're going to do reversing here. Do some heavy reversing. We don't want this to come loose. And we'll just sew along here like this. And when we get to the other end, we're going to reverse over there. Okay, here, this is going to want to pull, and this is going to be sewing down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut just a relief, not going too far into our seam, right like that. That will allow this to basically pull up a little bit, and we're going to do the same thing to the other end. I need to go a little bit deeper right there. So see, that'll pull. We'll do the same thing over here. Okay, so now on the right side of the fabric, we want to baste everywhere here, all the way around, but not at this edge here.
Next up, basting boxing to the top plate.
And then I'm going to just bend it to go around here, and we're going to follow this edge very closely, and we are going to use the canvas patterning ruler to press it down well. And we're going to go all the way around.
Now we're going to peel off all the transfer paper of the double-sided tape.
Okay, we know that our boxing is on right because this little section goes right here. So this goes this direction, and outside surfaces face each other. This is the bottom edge, and this is the bottom edge. So it doesn't go on like this, it goes on like this. So the bottom edges are flush with each other. And we're going to baste this on, and we're going to follow that curve. And I love to use these new clips. I don't even know what their names are, but we'll find out before we're done finishing the video. They're very sticky, and they're extremely strong. So I use those to help shape the applications like this in place. So when we get around that, you can see the fabric wants to curl around because there's shape in there. We'll put another clip there. And we just want to follow this all the way up this side. Now we sewed this with a stitch to keep it flat, so I don't have to worry about pulling it out as much, which is nice. And I'll put a clip about every 10 or 12 inches apart just to hold it together. And here we might have to cut some slits in this if it doesn't go around the pip well in the boxing. Outside turns, you cut it in the boxing. Inside turns, you cut it in the plate. Yeah, I think I'm going to put a couple in there just to make sure. So at this curve, I'm going to cut some slits that go no deeper than our seam allowance. 2, 3, maybe 4 slits. And that will allow me to, see, take that corner beautifully. And we probably should do it over here too, because we have another corner. That's nice, nice. And then we're going to do this little slit there at that turn, right there. Should allow me to make a turn. Okay, so now I'm going to stop right here like we talked about, and I'm going to clip it. Okay, we don't want to baste any further than that. Let's clip this on too, and maybe this. That way it'll never come apart when we take it to the machine. Now let's go to this corner, and we're going to start over here on the other end because we want to leave the zipper plaque undone until the end to take up any excess. So now this goes on. Now this type of application can be confusing. This is the top edge that gets basted to here, and this top edge usually will be right about here. So if you actually put it here and you walk this around, you can see that this gets flipped around, and this is the bottom edge. So this gets started right here, and we baste this down. I'm going to clip it because it's going to seriously be torqued on. And what it does is we follow this around this area here, and I did cut some slits into this. You can't hardly tell, but there's slits that are going no deeper than our 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I want to follow this around, following that edge. And let's put a clip there to hold it in place. See if am I clipping it? Yeah, I am. And then we'll flip this over like this, and this comes around, and it'll make a little dog ear, which is completely fine, and gets basted like that, okay? So it looks complicated, but just trust your feelings, Luke. And now here's where we have that part that didn't join up perfectly. We want this to be up against the edge. Then all of a sudden we want this to pop in, and that helps to pull the foam in. So we want to transfer from shallow to more depth, and we baste to here. So let's clip that. Okay. Now when we get to this corner over here, make sure that's flat. There we go. We want to cut a slit at this corner, a 1/2 inch prior to this corner. So there's the corner. We're a 1/2 inch from that corner, and we don't want to go deeper than our seam allowance. And what that allows us to do is if I put my finger here, and if I twist this open, it almost makes a perfect square, and that helps us to turn that corner. Okay? So now I'm going to stop basting again about 2 to 3 inches from here, clip it here, and then we're going to concentrate on the zipper plaque. So now we can take up the excess fabric with a fold, and that fold helps to keep the slider from being exposed. So I'm going to basically create a fold about, let's say that 2 inches or so, and we're going to put that down, and then we're going to baste over here. Now we can make adjustments if we have to when we get to the other side of the zipper plaque. So we're going to baste all around here until we get to there, and we'll see if we're happy. So here we are, we've basted all the way to here, and you can see this fold is almost the same as the other one. It doesn't have to be the same, but I'd like it to be similar, and it is similar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crease it down, boop, like that, and I'm going to move my clip to hold that in place right there. So we have a fold on both ends, and we've taken up the excess with the zipper plaque. I think we're about ready to sew.
It's now time to sew the boxing to the top plate.
Okay, so what's the best place to start sewing? Well, this is the throat of the sewing machine, so obviously we want the fabric outside the throat, which means I'm going to start here at this corner and we're going to sew around that direction. So we'll take it to the machine. Our magnetic guide is on at a 1/2 inch. Our needle's in center position, and we're going to start at that corner that we talked about. We're going to remove this clip. We're going to remove them as we go, and we'll do a little bit of reversing here at the beginning just to make sure that it doesn't come undone. And we're going to follow it a 1/2 inch seam allowance all around. We'll remove this clip, make sure it's still basted together, make sure you're not sewing any wrinkles in, so I can feel a wrinkle right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically pull the fabric. You can't tell, but I'm actually straightening the fabric underneath to get rid of that wrinkle. There, you can see it. Sometimes if you just push the fabric back like that, now the wrinkle's gone. So now I can follow this corner, check to make sure that everything's flat again. No wrinkles in the seam allowance area. Once you get past the corners, it's pretty easy. So now I'm past that corner. Okay, just make sure everything stays basted together and don't sew in your fabric pole. So I'm going to push it off to the side, and this is still basted nicely. I'm coming up to this corner, and this corner isn't a 90-degree corner, it's a gradual corner. I'm going to take off that clip. So what I want to do here is I want to push the fabric, since it's a corner, and try to get the wrinkle outside of my seam allowance area as I sew. So everything is flat, and we'll gradually go around the corner. See that wrinkle there? I don't want to sew that in, so I'm going to bury my needle. I'm going to twist the fabric around, get rid of this clip. This is that pip, and there will be wrinkles there. So I'm pushing that flat, as flat as I possibly can, and then I sew. Okay, and the bit needle's buried. I can move the fabric around some more. There it is, it's flat. Sometimes I just sew a couple stitches. Now I'm almost at the turn, so the needle's buried coming up so that I won't skip stitches. I'm going to lift the foot, and I'm going to pull the fabric around this way so I can create this little, what do you call it? Dog ear? I don't know what it's called. Okay, now I'm twisting again, and I have, this is the end of the zipper plaque, so I'm going to lift my foot to make sure that goes flat. Okay, and then we can continue to follow this around the edge. We're sewing through the that pocket that we created, and we're past the pip. This is a 90-degree turn, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bury my needle, making sure that let me make sure this is going flat. Add about a 1/2 inch, which is right. Let me get rid of this clip, which I sewed on top of a little bit, right there. And now I'm going to go one more stitch right there. Okay. So now my needle's buried, and I'm going to pivot, lift my foot and pivot on that buried needle, and then I'm going to push the fabric back like this so that there's no wrinkle. And then I'm going to lower the foot and continue to sew. Okay, we're coming to this area where this takes a transitional turn, and it was unbasted, so I'm going to rebaste it down with my fingers. I remove the clip, and this is a transition. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold this back, okay? And we're going to sew up to that point. Okay, and so now I'm on that transition, and I'm going to push this up into the machine. Just sewed right over that, which is perfect. I'm going to remove some of these clips to get them out of the way. This has a little bit of a pip, but don't worry about that. So let's see, we want to follow a 1/2 inch into here. So I'm going to try to do that just by looking at the bottom side. I'm going to ignore the pip, think about the bottom side. That should do it. And now I'm almost a 1/2 inch from this seam here, so I want to bury my needle at a 1/2 inch, which is right about there. Okay, my needle's coming up a little bit. Now I want to lift my foot. So to do this with the foot up, I'm going to push this in, and I'm going to turn this so that it basically rotates around like this. Because we got to come down this straight edge. and make sure that there's no wrinkle in this. So spend some time here, otherwise you will get a pucker here. Small pucker is okay, but I'd rather not have any. Okay, so there, that looks pretty good. Most of the wrinkles are out. I'm going to feel for any wrinkles in the seam allowance area, and there are none. I'm a little bit far from this edge, but I think it's going to be okay because I'm going to walk at that direction. So watch this. Okay, now there's a wrinkle that I'm sewing into. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to bury the needle here. I'm going to get rid of this thing. I'm going to see if I can work that out before, because I don't think I sewed it in. If I did, I can pull the stitches and redo it. So I don't think I sewed a wrinkle in. I'm going to go ahead and hopefully say that I didn't. So I'm going to go all the way to the end, and this is our end, and I'm going to do some reversing here, and then we're going to check. And if it did, I'll rip out those stitches. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so when I turn it right side out, this is what you should get. And there is that, it's a slight wrinkle, but it's ever so small. I don't think I'm going to worry about it. I might take the stitches out and repair that. I think I'll take this out, just fix it, but you get the point. It's easy to fix, and this material will not show any holes because it's so porous. Because this is a rather porous material, as you can see, you can kind of see through it. You can see my hand through it. I'm going to do a top stitch just to reinforce it and make it stronger. So I'm going to fold my seam allowance towards the boxing, this direction. This is my 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to start here at this end, same end that we started sewing, and I'm going to splay the fabric apart both left and right, and I'm going to sew really close to that stitch. So I'm going to leave my needle in center position, and I'm going to use the left side of my center foot as a guide. And here at the beginning, I'll do a little bit of reversing, making sure I'm sewing through the seam allowance on the bottom side. And I just want to splay that fabric. Now this is the turn that we have right away, so you want to sew up to that point and bury your needle, and then pull your fabric and make sure your seam allowance is going the right direction. So we got to make sure that it goes that way. Okay, so now I can feel that it's in the area I'm going to be sewing, and I'm going to carefully sew around this corner, and then I'm going to check my seam allowance. I don't only have to do this pretty much on the corners. When I get to the straightaways, I don't have to hardly ever check my seam allowance. Okay, so now I'm pretty much to a straightaway, and once I pull the seam allowance that direction, then I just pull left and right, and we do a top stitch. Now, top stitch isn't required, but for a porous material, it's not a bad idea. This is that little pip, and if you have to sew only a couple stitches at a time and flatten it out, go ahead and do so. So I've got it flat up to that point, and I'm going to start taking the turn, and then needle buried, I'm going to pull this fabric and pull it left and right, and maybe sew 2 more stitches. That's all you keep doing.
We'll be taking that assembly and basting it and sewing it to the bottom plate now.
This is the bottom plate. We're going to put the 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas and upholstery around the entire bottom perimeter with the outside surface facing up. So we need to transfer this 90-degree corner up to here so we know where it is directly across from it. So I'm just going to fold up and sight, and I can tell that it's right about there. So I fold the material, and I'll cut a little boop. Now I know where that corner is. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to peel this back, and we're going to peel a little bit of this back. Outside surfaces are facing each other, and this is the inside. And since we have this corner, we're going to start right here at the corner, and we're going to put it on, so it's just like that, which should allow it to go left and right. And then we're going to baste this on around the perimeter, and then I'll clip it after I'm done, after I'm satisfied with everything. So peel this off, follow this around, like so.
You may have noticed in the clip about 3 seconds ago, I sewed some of the fabric pull in. I had to fix that.
Okay, so we're at this little pip area, and this is where we're going to follow this around. I'm going to cut some relief slits in the boxing to make it go around there, just like we did before. If I can grab my scissors. I'm going to baste this on, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right before I get to the zipper plaque. So again, 1 or 2 inches, which is right about there, and we're going to go all the way back to that 90-degree turn, and we're going to baste in this direction, and this should fold like this and be almost equal to the opposite side. So we fold it over like that and baste this direction all the way to the zipper plaque end. Okay, we've come to here, and I don't want to baste this down until I get that fold created that's equal to the other side, which looks like it's going to just about be perfect. So we're going to baste this side down first, then I'm going to fold this back until it takes out the excess, which should be right there, and it looks like we're good to go. So now I'm going to clip it with clips to make sure it doesn't come apart when we sew it. Needle's at center position. We've got the magnetic clip on at a 1/2 inch. I'm just going to start someplace back here with the zipper plaque, and I'll do a little teeny bit of reversing here, and then we'll sew around. It's pretty easy, just sew a 1/2 inch from the edge, following the contour of the cushion, making sure that everything's staying basted together as you go. When I get to the little pip, I'll kind of show you that when we get there. Okay, we're almost to that corner that's really odd. We're sewing over that flap of fabric here. I'm about a 1/2 inch in. I'm going to bury my needle. I'm going to pivot to sew around this area like that. Lower my foot. Push the wrinkles out to the best of my ability in the seam allowance area. Bury my needle, remove this, push this wrinkle out. Let's turn this around. Not bad right there. There we go. I'm coming up to where the zipper is on the underside. You can kind of feel it here. And what I want to do is I want to do some reversing over that. So I'm just going to reverse over it once. And we'll do that when we do the zipper on the other side as well.
To complete the fabric pull, we need to sew it to the zipper on the bottom plate.
Okay, so now we have to turn it right side out. You can either do that with this zipper or the other one or both. I'm just going to turn it right side out. Okay, you want to push the corners out and inspect them, make sure that it looks good, and I think ours does. So good, awesome. So now we have the zipper pull. Okay, now this has to be a separate cavity, which means this one can't be basted to that zipper because you'd close the cavity off and never could get the foam in. So we have to leave this open. So that means this gets basted over here to this. So what I do is I take this fabric pull out, and then I just simply lay it down, put double-sided tape along this edge, the edge that it has to be basted up against. So let's do that first. Now we'll peel off the transfer paper. Now you don't want to do this so that it's askew. So there are no marks that indicate exactly where it goes, but basically you want that same amount of seam allowance here to be here. So it means I would baste it right to there, and I baste it pretty stinking close to those teeth. It'll interfere a little bit with the slider, but I would rather have it do that because it's only basically open to remove or to insert the foam and remove it, which hardly ever happens. So we're going to baste it just like that, about that close to the teeth. all the way down this length, and check to make sure that it's about the same on this side as it is this. If we need to, we can make adjustments. Now there is a shape in this, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. If it were straight, it'd be easy, but hey, I'm showing you the hardest one. So it looks like it's about the same distance over here as it is down there, so I don't think it's askew much. If anything, it's a little bit too far here, but I think it's good. So now we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to sew it, with this being the top side. I'm sorry, we're going to sew it so this is the underside and this is the top side. So you want to make sure that you're only sewing in this flap. So this is out of the way, the bulk of the rest of it's out of the way, and I'm going to lay it flat and start as close to that slider as I possibly can, the end of the zipper. And sometimes you have to finagle this to get it under the foot and move it backwards. So like that. And if I'm not all the way at the end, sometimes I start sewing close to the end. So I'm going to put my foot down and I'm going to go in reverse, because sometimes that gets me closer to the end. You see, I'm not all the way to the end, but I'm very close to it. And I want to make sure that I do some reversing here. Okay, now we're just going to keep that foot up against the zipper's teeth as we sew here. My needle's in center position. It doesn't have to be, it could be to the left. Now it came unbasted here, so I had to rebaste it. There we go, because of the curve. I'm going to lift my fabric up over here so it's a little bit easier to sew this shapely area. If it were straight, this would be easy, but it's got a curve in it. So lift the fabric, assembly. Now I'm to the straightaway, so it's pretty easy now. We're going to go all the way to the end here, flatten it out, and we'll do some reversing when we reach the end. Right there. Can I get in there? Okay, we're done.
The last thing to do with our segmented cushion with the rolled front is to reinsert the foam in the cover.
Okay, I'm going to put the foam in, and sometimes I use silk film to make it easier, but with this small piece it's not really that difficult to do. So we're going to push it in here. I'm going to push it into the corners before I start to close up things. It should be a nice snug fit, which it looks like it's becoming a nice snug fit. And then we'll zip this shut. Now we haven't adjusted it completely, so don't think that it's in the appropriate spot yet. It's not. Okay, so now we're going to open up this zipper and we're going to insert the other foam. Now I'm going to use silk film because it's just easier to get it in there. This is silk film and it's center folded, so I'm going to put the top side down, and this is the side that is going to have the zipper on here, so we want that facing me so I can insert the vacuum, and we want to just wrap it around with a little bit of overlap, and this will compress the foam beautifully, making it easy to insert. And you can leave it inside your cushion, which prevents another water barrier, and it also helps to position the foam within the cover. So there we go. Now I need my shop vac. So I'm going to put this on the foam, and then I'm going to turn it on, the shop vac, and we're going to cover this up. Okay, so once it's in there, before you zip it, you need to get that silk film out of the way, because it will clog up a zipper fast. Push those corners in, sometimes you have to put your hands in here to get everything in the right spot, like at this pip. Okay, now I usually put it on the edge of a table like this if I'm working by myself, and I push the silk film back so I don't get it in the zipper area. You can't feel this stuff, that's nice and it's noiseless. And where's the slider at? Slider is, yep, right here. Go away, silk film. Now, we still haven't got things positioned yet, but I'm going to zip it up and see if I like what it looks like. And then we'll position some of the fabric a little bit more carefully because it looks like it's rolled over a little bit. But you need to get an overall bearing of how it's looking before you make adjustments. We're going to get this out of the way and zip it up completely. Okay, so now that it's zipped up, you want to just work everything in so that the seam allowance falls where you want it to. It's not uncommon to have to work things out for a couple minutes before you get everything perfect. There's our fabric pole, that looks pretty nice. Our edge here looks pretty good. There's a few little wrinkles there, but they're not too aggressive. New foam would probably help to resolve that more than anything else. The front's not too bad. I have a little bit of a wrinkle effect here, but actually I think it looks pretty good. So I think we are pretty much done. There's what the bottom side looks like, not that that's important. Now that I think I'm happy, I'm going to go ahead and push the slider into our little pocket, which basically hides it almost completely. I like to have a little bit of the tab sticking out, that way I can open it up if I need to. But we can clean up any of these. Okay, so our cushion is done. Let's see how she fits with the other cushions that we made in the same manner. Oh yeah, nice. Look at that nice little pip. Whew. Beauteous.
This was the most difficult of the segmented cushions with a rolled front. The others were quite easy, so after watching this video, the techniques are going to be a breeze for the other two in this salon area. Sailrite highly recommends Outdura 100% solution-dyed acrylic upholstery fabric that's available from Sailrite in a multitude of colors and also styles. Check out the full materials list and tools list in the description of this video. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe and click the bell to be notified of new tutorial videos when they become available. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.